Why do humans cry? And why does it actually feel good? Imagine you're sitting alone watching a movie you've seen before. You already know what happens. You know the dog dies in the third act. You knew it was coming the entire time. And yet, when the moment arrives, something happens in your chest. Your throat tightens, your eyes fill up, and before you can stop it, you're crying at a movie about a fictional dog that you knew was going to die. And the weird part? You feel better afterward. Not worse, not embarrassed. Actually, measurably, physically better. That is one of the strangest things the human body does. And we have been doing it for so long, so consistently, that we treat it as completely normal. We cry at weddings. We cry at funerals. We cry when we're angry, when we're overwhelmed, when someone is unexpectedly kind to us, when a piece of music hits a particular chord at a particular moment, when we're exhausted and someone asks if we're okay with just a little too much sincerity. We cry at being human, at the full, complicated, occasionally unbearable weight of being a creature with feelings and memories and other people we love. But why? Why does the body produce liquid from your eyes when you feel something strongly? And why, of all the strange things the human body does this one so often feel like relief? That question sounds simple. The answer is one of the most fascinating rabbit holes in all of human biology. And by the end of this video, I promise you will never think about crying the same way again. Let's go. First, let's establish something most people don't know. Not all tears are the same. Your body produces 3 chemically distinct types of tears. They serve completely different purposes, and only one of them has anything to do with emotion. The first type is called basal tears. These are the tears your eyes produce constantly, every single day, whether you feel anything or not. Right now, as you watch this, your eyes are coated in a thin film of them. They lubricate the surface of your eye, deliver oxygen to your cornea, and protect against dust and debris. Without basal tears, your eyes would dry out and stop working within hours. They are maintenance fluid, biological windshield washer. Not emotional, not meaningful, just necessary. The second type is reflex tears. These appear when something irritates your eye. Smoke, wind, a piece of dust, or the sulfur compounds released when you cut an onion. Reflex tears flood the surface of the eye to flush the irritant out as fast as possible. Emergency rinse cycle. Again, completely mechanical, no feelings involved. And then there is the third type, emotional tears. The ones we actually care about, the ones that show up when the dog dies. Here is where it gets strange. Emotional tears are chemically different from the other two, and when scientists first discovered this, it changed everything about how we understand crying. In the early 1980s, a biochemist named William Fry became one of the first researchers to seriously analyze what emotional tears are actually made of. What he found was remarkable. Emotional tears contain significantly higher concentrations of stress hormones than reflex tears. We're talking about hormones your body produces when you're under psychological pressure, the same chemicals that build up in your system during grief, during fear, during the kind of emotional weight that sits on your chest and doesn't leave. And here's the part that should stop you completely. Those same tears also contain natural painkillers, endorphins, the same chemicals your brain releases during exercise, during laughter, during the moments that feel unexpectedly, irrationally good. Stress hormones and natural painkillers, both in the same tear, leaving your body through your face. Fry's hypothesis was elegant and almost too simple to believe. Crying is the body's mechanism for literally flushing stress out through your eyes. When you cry, you are not just expressing emotion, you are excreting it, physically removing the chemical signature of psychological distress from your body. This would explain something that everyone who has ever had a good cry already knows. You feel better afterward. Not because anything changed, not because the problem went away, but because something chemical shifted. Something was released that the body needed to release. A pressure valve, built directly into your face, specifically calibrated to the experience of overwhelming emotion. But this raises a deeper question. Why do humans cry emotionally at all? Because here is something most people don't realize. We are the only species on Earth that does it. Other animals produce tears for lubrication and reflex purposes. Crocodiles produce tears, which is where the phrase crocodile tears comes from, though not for emotional reasons. Elephants have been observed with fluid around their eyes during apparent distress, but the full emotional crying experience, the welling up, the overflow, the direct connection connection between what you feel inside and what pours out of your eyes. That appears to be uniquely, specifically human, which means it evolved. At some point in human history, this behavior either appeared or intensified to a degree that made it distinctly ours. And for evolution to preserve a behavior, that behavior has to be doing something useful. So what was emotional crying actually for? The most compelling answer has nothing to do with biology. It has everything to do with other people. Think about what makes humans different from almost every other animal on Earth. We are extraordinarily, almost absurdly dependent on each other. A newborn human is one of the most helpless creatures in the animal kingdom. A baby deer can walk within hours of birth. A baby horse can run. A baby human cannot walk for a year, cannot feed itself for years, cannot survive without constant adult care for roughly a decade. We are born profoundly incomplete, and for most of human history, that meant that being cut off from your group was not just uncomfortable, it was a death sentence. This dependency shaped everything about how we communicate. We developed language, yes, but before language, before words, we developed signals, facial expressions, vocalizations, ways of broadcasting our internal state to the people around us so they could respond. Crying is one of the oldest and most powerful of those signals. A crying infant communicates need with an effectiveness that is almost impossible to ignore. The sound, the sight, the urgency of it triggers a response in caregiving adults that is not voluntary, not chosen. It is instinctive, something ancient and deep in the mammalian brain that says, "This creature needs help. Go, now." That signal works. Evolution kept it. And then, as humans became more complex, it expanded. As our social lives grew more layered, as our relationships deepened, as the things we felt became harder to name, crying evolved with us. It stretched from a pure distress signal into something richer and stranger, something that could express grief and joy and gratitude and overwhelm and awe, all through the same basic mechanism, all producing the same outward signal. I am feeling something too large for my body to contain quietly. And the people around you, when they see that signal, respond in ways that are also not entirely chosen. Research has shown that watching someone else cry activates mirror neurons, the same neural systems that fire when you yourself experience something. You feel their tears in your own body. Something shifts in your chest. You move toward them. You want to help. This is why humans have always gathered together to grieve, why we sit with each other at funerals and weddings and moments of crisis. The crying is not incidental to those gatherings. It is the technology. It is how groups of humans process shared experience and emerge from it bound more tightly than before. Now, the part nobody talks about enough. Why does crying feel good? We have established that it releases stress hormones, that it signals need to others, that it creates connection, all of which explains why the body does it. But none of that fully explains the specific feeling of a good cry, that particular warmth that settles in afterward, the sense of having been wrung out and then refilled with something quieter. That feeling has a name. Catharsis, borrowed from ancient Greek theater. The idea that experiencing and expressing overwhelming emotion in a safe space produces a kind of purging, a release, a return to equilibrium that feels restorative rather than depleting. Aristotle wrote about it 2,400 years ago. He noticed that audiences watching deeply sad plays about terrible events left the theater feeling lighter, better. He didn't have the neuroscience to explain why, but he noticed the pattern and named it. And the name stuck because the experience it describes is absolutely real. Modern research has started to fill in the mechanism. When you cry, your body releases oxytocin, the bonding chemical, alongside endorphins. Both produce a mild analgesic effect, a dulling of pain, a warmth, a settling. Your heart rate slows, your breathing deepens. The branch of your nervous system responsible for rest and recovery takes over from the branch responsible for high alert. Crying doesn't just express the overwhelm, it helps end it. It is the signal and the solution at the same time. But here is where it gets genuinely complicated, because crying doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it feels terrible. Sometimes you cry and feel worse afterward, emptied out and raw, and no better than before. What is the difference? The research is consistent on this. The emotional relief of crying is almost entirely context-dependent. The same tears that feel cathartic in one situation feel hollow in another. And the variable that matters most is not the crying itself. It is what happens around it. Crying that leads to comfort, from another person or from a shift in your own understanding, tends to produce relief. Crying that happens in isolation, in shame, or in a context where the underlying problem cannot be touched, tends to feel worse, which tells us something important. The biology of crying was designed for a social environment. The tears release the stress hormones, the parasympathetic nervous system kicks in, but the full emotional resolution, the part that actually feels like relief, seems to require the completion of the circuit, the signal being received, the comfort arriving, the connection being made, even if that connection is just with yourself, sitting alone and finally allowing something that you have been carrying too tightly to actually be felt. Now let's talk about something that almost never comes up in these conversations. For most of human history, crying was not considered weakness. The modern idea that tears are a failure of self-control, something to suppress and apologize for, is extraordinarily recent, and it runs directly against most of human history. Ancient Greek warriors wept openly. The Iliad, one of the oldest surviving works of Western literature, is full of men crying. Achilles, the greatest warrior in the poem, weeps repeatedly, over the death of his closest friend, over his own fate. These tears are not presented as weakness. They are presented as evidence of full humanity, of someone who feels as powerfully as they fight. Ancient Romans hired professional mourners for funerals. Their job was to cry loudly and publicly. Grief too small to be visible was considered an insult to the dead. In many traditional cultures, crying at the right moments in the right ways is not just accepted, it is required. A form of participation, a way of saying, I am fully here, feeling this, with you. The suspicion of tears you may have grown up with is not wisdom. It is a cultural artifact, a recent one, and one that runs against biology, against history, and against the evidence about what happens to people who never allow themselves to cry. Here is perhaps the strangest finding in all of crying research. The tears you cry at art, at music, at films, at books. These are in some ways the most mysterious of all, because they serve no obvious social function. The fictional dog cannot see you cry. The composer of the piece that just broke your heart is not there. There is no immediate bond being formed, no comfort being offered. And yet, people consistently report that crying at art is among the most emotionally satisfying experiences available to them, sometimes more cathartic than crying in real life. Why?
Because art creates a safe container for emotions that real life doesn't always provide. When something devastating happens to you in actual life, the tears are tangled up with the situation itself, with fear and confusion and the need to act, and other people who have their own needs. The emotion is never quite clean, never quite complete. But when a song reaches into your chest at the exact right moment, the emotion arrives without threat, without consequence. You can feel the full weight of it in a protected space where nothing is required of you except to feel it. And in that space, you make contact with parts of yourself that ordinary life keeps at a distance. Grief you haven't finished with, love you don't have words for, the particular loneliness of being someone who feels things deeply in a world that tends to reward those who don't. Art gives you permission to feel these things fully, and crying is how the body says thank you. There is one last thing, something that ties the biology and the history and the philosophy together into something that feels true at a level deeper than any single explanation. Crying is an act of surrender. When you cry, you are not in control. Your voice breaks, your face changes shape, your vision blurs, your body takes over from your mind and does what it needs to do, regardless of what your rational brain would prefer. And in a species that spends enormous energy maintaining composure, projecting capability, managing the image we present to the world, this surrender is remarkable. It is the body saying, what I am carrying right now is too large to carry alone, while also pretending to be fine. Something has to give. And when something gives, when the armor cracks and the tears come and the weight lifts, what often follows is not weakness, it is clarity. The particular clear-eyed calm of someone who stopped pretending and started actually feeling. The Japanese have a practice called ruikatsu, which translates roughly as tear-seeking. People gather specifically to watch sad films or listen to sad music together with the explicit goal of crying, not to wallow, but to deliberately access the release that tears provide. The practice has grown significantly in recent years, particularly among people in high-pressure professional environments who report having no other outlet for emotional processing. They gather to cry together, and they leave lighter. So, why do humans cry? And why does it feel good? Because you are a social animal whose nervous system has been shaped by millions of years of living in groups where communicating your inner state to others was survival. Because your body is wise enough to know that some emotions are too large to be processed quietly and has built a mechanism for releasing their chemical signature directly through your face. Because the endorphins and oxytocin that follow tears are your biology's way of rewarding you for being honest about what you feel. Because the catharsis that follows a good cry is not a myth or a weakness. It is a measurable physiological event that has been happening in human beings since long before we had words for any of it.
And because somewhere in the architecture of what it means to be human is the understanding that feeling things fully, even the terrible things, even the things we cannot fix or explain, is not a malfunction. It is the point. You are not too sensitive. You are not weak. You are not broken. You are a creature built to feel. And when the feeling gets large enough, your body knows exactly what to do with it. So the next time your eyes fill up, at a movie you have already seen, at a song you weren't expecting, at a stranger's unexpected kindness, let it happen. Something recognized it as real. And that recognition, that full, unguarded moment of actually feeling something, is not a small thing. That is the whole thing. What was the last thing that made you cry? Tell me in the comments. Until then, take care of yourselves. See you soon.